Hi peoples, I am Tiago Silvestre, the host of this channel, and today I will show you the top 10 scariest creatures that you will see across the table. You know that feeling when your opponent plays a scary creature and you will feel like, oh my god, what do I do now? How can I stop this? You know that feeling. So I will show you the top 10 of the most scariest creatures. But it's not fair to show creatures like Eldrazi's or something big, because everybody gets scared of a big creature with indestructible or trample or whatever. So today I show you top 10 scariest creatures but low mana, so no more than 4 converted mana cost or mana value as they call it now. So let's start. Before we start the top 10, I want to show you an honorable mention, and it is Death Shadow. And Death Shadow is definitely one of the most scariest, because paying 1 mana, for example, for being a 10/10, it's extremely scary. And if your opponent pays 2 mana for 2 Death Shadows, like 8/8, what you gonna do? So your opponent have to have their life total low, but it's very scary. So honorable mentions aside, let's start with the top 10. Not in particularly order, but the first one that I will show you is Tarmogoyf. Tarmogoyf for 2 mana in modern, like for example in turn 2, can be like a 2/3 or 3/4, but on turn 3 your opponent can make it like 6/7, for example. It has to have a little bit of luck to be 6/7, but it can be like on turn 3 attacking you with 5/6, for example. Not too difficult. So for me it's a little bit scary in modern to have your opponent playing Tarmogoyf. Now the next card is Atraxa, Praetor's Voice. In Commander, when you see this card, at least for me, I be scared, because not only for the 4 abilities that she has, but proliferate. If your opponent is playing planeswalkers or counters, doesn't matter, it will pump the planeswalkers to reach their ultimate ability, or will pump artifact counters or +1 counters. It's scary. Plus it has flying, vigilance, death touch and lifelink. So if your opponent is attacking you, they will not tap, so that Atraxa will be ready to defend next turn. It has flying, so only creatures with flying and reach. You know that your creature will die because of death touch, only if your creature is indestructible, but it has to have flying to block it. So flying and indestructible. Or you can have flying first strike, and you have to have a 4 power creature or bigger to survive Atraxa. And it has lifelink. Unless you have that first strike 4 power creature, at least Atraxa will give 4 life to your opponent. This is on attacking side. On defensive side, which creature will attack that Atraxa will not kill? You have to lead a flying, death touch and lifelink creature. So unless you have unblockable or the first strike creature, unless you have one of those, your creature will die. Or indestructible. If you have indestructible, your creature will not die too. But if you have any other creature, your creature will die. And even if you have like an 8/8 trample creature, and your creature will die, you will deal 4 damage, but Atraxa with lifelink will gain 4 life, so you kill Atraxa, you deal 4, and Atraxa gain 4. So in Commander this is one of the scariest creatures. Now move on. We have Elvish Harsh Druid. This creature is a little bit different on the scary side, because it's not scary as Atraxa, for example, but it's scary in a different way. For example, in a health deck, if your opponent plays an Elvish Harsh Druid, the amount of mana that they can generate at turn 4, it's the most scary, because you don't know how much mana they can produce the next turn they play Elvish Harsh Druid, and you don't know how much mana they can utilize. It's so scary because they can play a high mana value card that you cannot expect that on turn 4. That's why Elvish Harsh Druid it's scary. On the theme of elves, the next card is Shaman of the Pack. It's scary in a different way of Elvish Harsh Druid, because when you see this card, probably it will kill you, because you have life equal or less to the amount of elves your opponent controls. So normally your opponent will play a bunch of elves, then play Shaman of the Pack, and if you don't deal with Shaman of the Pack, normally you will lose the game. That's why when you see Shaman of the Pack, you must be scary, because you will lose the game probably. So the next one is a beast, is Questing Beast. At 4 mana, a 4/4 with Vigilance, Death Touch and Haste, and a creature that cannot be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less, and making combat damage of your creatures can't be prevented. And if that's not enough, when this creature deals combat damage to an opponent, it deals that much damage to Planeswalker that the opponent controls. So if you see this creature playing by your opponent, this creature will attack you instantly. It will not tap, so the next turn you have to deal with a Death Touch 4/4 Death Touch creature, and you have to have a creature with power 3 or more to block this creature, and you can't prevent that damage. And if you didn't block this creature, you may lose loyalty counters on your Planeswalkers, if not lose a Planeswalker. And this came out of nowhere, so because these have haste, these come out of nowhere and you have to be ready. So when you see this, if you don't have a creature with 3 or less power, and if you are playing with Planeswalkers, This is the most scary creature you can see. Moving on, we have Phyrexian Obliterator. This is a heavy black mana creature because your opponent have to playing mono black. If it isn't mono black, it's very difficult to play the Obliterator, but it's for 4 mana, a 5/5 trample, and if that's not already good, the other ability will destroy you completely. So whenever a source deals damage to Phyrexian Obliterator, that source controller sacrifices that many permanents. So when your opponent plays this card, if you attack with a creature and your opponent plays with Obliterator, your opponent defends with Obliterator, you will need to sacrifice permanents. For example, if you attack with a 4/4 and your opponent defends with Obliterator, you will have to sacrifice 4 permanents. It's as simple as this. On the attacking side, if you didn't block this 5/5 trample, you take 5 damage. If you block this creature, for example with a 2/2, you will have to sacrifice 2 permanents. It's that simple. This is the most scary creature on black that you will find for 4 mana or fewer. Now, not too different from Phyrexian Obliterator is Michiko Konda Trust Seeker. So it's a 4 mana 2/2 and says whenever a source an opponent controls deals damage to you, that player sacrifices a permanent. For example, if you are playing a token deck, for example attack with 4 1/1 flying creatures, if that 4 1/1 flying creatures deal damage, you have to sacrifice that number of permanents. So if you will have to sacrifice 4 permanents. So if you choose to sacrifice the permanents that deal damage, your creatures will only deal damage 1 time. Your creatures deal damage, then will be destroyed. And this is a white card. Your opponent, for example, if they are gaining life, you are attacking for nothing because your creatures will die and they will gain life that they lost. So unless you destroy this card, you may are attacking for nothing, just for destroying your creatures. If that is not scary to you, for at least for me is. Now moving on to red, I have here for you Perforus, God of the Forge. This creature for 4 mana is a 6/5 indestructible that you have to have a devotion to red to be a creature, but that's not the important part. Well, if your opponent has a 6/5 indestructible and can attack with it, it's not good for you. But the most scary part for me at least is whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Perforus deals 2 damage to each opponent. So for example, if your opponent plays a card that makes tokens, for example, if they play a card that creates 3 1/1 goblins, for example, just by creating that 3 1/1 goblins, they will deal 6 damage to you. And for example, if the next turn they will do it again, they will deal another 6 damage. That's 12 damage in 2 turns. And that is just by playing one card each turn. If they can play or generate more token creatures, they will deal much more damage. This in Commander can escalate more quickly, and they can deal, I don't know, 20 damage in a turn, for example. So be scary of that ability. Now let's go to a blue creature, and is Laboratory Maniac. This is a well-known card, and it's scary for me because if you see this card, you know what's gonna happen. You know that your opponent will mill itself and it win the game. If you don't do anything, you know that that's what will happen. You know that your opponent will mill every single card that they have in their deck, and they just will win the game. And the only thing you can do is in the creature. You will have to deal with the creature. But you know that your opponent will playing blue, so probably they will have counters in hand, so it will not be that easy to deal with this card. So it's very scary. Last but not least, it's Omaneth, Locus of Creation. So this 4/4 elemental creature, when enters the battlefield, it draws a card. So when your opponent plays this card, it will be replaced. Your opponent will end up with the same number of cards in their hands. Plus, the ability Landfall. When a land enters the battlefield under your opponent's control, your opponent will gain 4 life. And the second time they do this, they will add 4 mana, being the colors of Omaneth. So, when your opponent plays this card, they will replace their card in hand, and if they can trigger the landfall one time, they will gain 4 life. If they can trigger the landfall 2 times, they will replace the mana that they spend. If they trigger the landfall 3 times, they will deal 4 damage to each opponent in each planeswalker opponent's control. So with fetch lands, that's much easier to reach at least the second landfall trigger. So you are watching a Moneth that replaces itself on hand and replaces itself on mana. So it's a 4/4 that replaces everywhere. So it's a free 4/4 that enters the battlefield and has these landfall trigger abilities that gain life and deal damage. This card is extremely brutal. This card is extremely scary. So that's it, guys. This is the top 10 of the most scariest creatures across the table that you will find. If you think that there's a creature that I didn't put in this top 10, tell me in the comments below. Like the video if you like it, subscribe, and thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye!